And for the third time ever, we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Reviewing Network Live, our weekly stream of consciousness conversation recording session where we sit back, relax, we talk about things that happened in the last week in terms of news, stories in general that I think you might find interesting, and just overall just sitting back and relaxing and just having a good time. And as I always have to say beforehand, these are going to be longer free-form conversation recording sessions where I sit with you guys, talk about things that happened in the last week. There's going to be some foul language here and there, so if you're offended by that, you probably don't want to listen to this, but if you're up to the challenge, as I always say, sit back, relax, and let's begin the conversation. And to be perfectly honest, it's a very slow week this week. There isn't a whole lot to really delve into in terms of big news stories. There's a couple of stories in particular that had my interest that I might as well bring up on here because everybody's been talking about it, and we actually got a little bit of an update on this story today, actually, so we'll get into that as we move along here. But before we do that, let's just start what we always start off with, and that is, of course, the weekend box office, the top 5 box office, which is not that interesting whatsoever. There was one big new release came out, and it couldn't even make the number 1 spot. It lost to, I'll get into that one in just a little bit, but we can go through this pretty quickly, too. So let's just go ahead and get right to it. The number 5 film this week, not surprisingly, Barbie, still hanging around in there. $3.9 million, about $4 million, 30% drop off from last week. $626 million after 9 weeks. Still in over 3,000 theaters. I mean, Oppenheimer has been out of 3,000 theaters for a while now. Barbie is still hanging in there in 3,000 theaters, which is really impressive considering that it's already been out on digital now, and sooner or later we're going to be hearing about a physical release coming soon. So the fact that this movie is still holding around after all these weeks is still really, really impressive stuff, and it just also goes to show you kind of the lack of films that we have out now. Case in point with the number 4 film. The number 4 film is My Big Fat Week Wedding 3, which, not surprisingly, dropped off big time after last week. $4.7 million, 53% drop off. $18.5 million. Somehow added 28 more theaters to its already overcrowded 3,600 theaters, which I'm just as confused as you are. I mean, nobody went to go see this movie, quite honestly. And why was it in 3,600 theaters? That just... You don't put a movie like this in 3,600 theaters. You say that for the blockbuster films. You don't use it for movies like this. Worldwide, it's brought in $23 million. I think the budget on this can't be that big. I can't believe that it would be that way. But it's not out there. But I have no reason to believe that this isn't a lower budgeted film. I mean, it has to be a lower budgeted film, honestly. I mean, there's no way that this thing costs more than like $50 million. I'd be shocked if it was more than $50 million. But even then, it probably won't make its money back. But there's no way that this thing costs more than $50 million. I mean, it just can't be that way. But so that's My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3. Let's move on to another threequel in the number 3 film, which is The Equalizer 3, which had a smaller drop off than last week's, but still dropped off $7.2 million. 39.7% drop off from last week. The total gross on this film after 3 weeks, $73.6 million, which, if you want to compare it to the other movies in the series, let me see if I can find The Equalizer's third weekend. The Equalizer in 2014 was at $81 million after 3 weeks, and then in 2018, Equalizer 2... $79.8 million, so this is still below the other 2 movies, but regardless, this is still doing similar business to the other films in the series. I mean, this is still doing kind of in the same trajectory as the other films. It already goes to $132 million worldwide. The budget on this is $70 million, so no matter what, it's going to be profit from this point on for this particular film. So, with that said, let's get to the shocker of the week. The number 2 film, the only new release of the weekend, which I did not think that this movie was going to do gangbuster business, but I would have thought it would have gotten more than... It would have at least opened at number 1, but, nope, it's A Haunting in Venice, which is the 3rd installment of the Hercule Poirot series that Kenneth Branagh started with Murder on the Orient Express, and then followed that up with last year with Death on the Nile. It's an interesting situation that we have here, because this one actually got the best reviews out of all the Hercule Poirot movies. It actually got better reviews than Murder on the Orient Express, and got better reviews than Death on the Nile, and yet it's the lowest gross. it's actually the lowest grossing of the three films, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of opening weekend. Because I think Death on the Nile was close. I think Death on the Nile... Let me double check here just to make sure. Let's see. Death on the Nile. Actually, Death on the Nile did worse than this. Actually, so this is right in the middle of the... Death on the Nile brought in $12.9 million. Haunting in Venice, $14.5 million. I think Murder on the Orient Express was somewhere around $30 million, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. Close, $28.7 million, which is close to what I said. But, I mean, it's not the greatest opening ever, but really... You don't have the star power that that Murder on the Orient Express or Death on the Nile had, and in fact, like I said, this did better than Death on the Nile. So the word of mouth got out with this movie, and I think there was a lot to believe that the film had a really good marketing campaign to get people invested in this. And for a $60 million budgeted film, this isn't the worst opening you could have. I mean, it's already made $37.5 million worldwide, so. A couple more weeks like this with some steady holds, and this should do fine worldwide services. I don't know if it's going to make its money. I'm pretty sure I'm more than willing to believe it's not going to make its money back here in the States, but I think it is going to make more than enough to solidify potentially continuing the series onto other films. And, rightfully so. I like these movies. I have not seen Death on the Haunting in Venice yet. I was going to go see it yesterday, but unfortunately, scheduling conflicts didn't work out in my favor, so that one, unfortunately, I'm going to have to wait. Hopefully, I'll get to see it before the start of October. That's my plan, to see it the first Saturday of October, because I'm going to the Pitt game next week, and then 2 weeks, and then the Saturday after that, I got to work. So, my hope is that I can get out to the theater to see this, as well as The Equalizer 3. Hopefully, those films will still be there. I would think that they would still be there, because there isn't a whole lot in terms of newer releases that could possibly combat this. But, let's get to the number one movie, and this was kind of a shocker that this one actually held up better than I thought it possibly could have. The Nun 2. The Nun 2 held by just about $230,000. Was the number one movie for the second week in a row. $14.73 million, 54% drop off, basically 55%, 54.8, $56.5 million. Now, if you want to compare this to the original Nun film, it's definitely lower, but I think it had a better hold than the other Nun film did. If I'm not, it had a much better hold than the other Nun film. The Nun had $85.1 million after 2 weekends, and had a 66.1 drop off from the opening weekend. This one had a much smaller drop off, so the possibility is there that this could have some sturdier business, or it could just be the fact that it was not a big weekend for the new releases. And like I said, everyone kind of thought that Haunting in Venice was going to be the movie that everyone was going to go see, and not so much. I mean, there's still a chance that after the final estimates come out, things could swipe around. Haunting in Venice could barely cross the number one, make it to number one. But then again, we really don't know for certain, but the numbers are really close on this week, so that's something you might want to keep a close ear on Monday when the final numbers come out. A $230,000 difference. Right now, The Nun 2 is at the front of it right now, but Haunting in Venice could sneak its way back up to number one, and if it does, it'll be the only weekend it's got, because next weekend it'll be all about Expendables 4, which I'm kind of curious to check out, but I'm not really in a rush to see it. I mean, like I said, I've got other things that in my life I got to deal with right now, and also these videos too. So I'm not going to be able to see that next week, or actually the week after that. But I think that movie could do. It's going to be interesting to see how that one does. I mean, it's been almost 10 years since the last Expendables movie. Is there going to be enough of an audience that's going to want to come back and see this film? After almost 10 years. Does Sylvester Stallone still have that star power with him? Can Jason Statham have that star power work for him? You have Megan Fox also in here, 50 Cent. I think Randy Couture is back in this one as well. Could be fun. Could be a fun movie. I don't know how it's going to do. I think it'll probably be the number one movie, but it might not have a big opening weekend. It could have an opening weekend similar to what Haunting in Venice does, but we will see what happens there. I'm still looking forward to checking it out, but in terms of the other movies in the top 10, no real surprises here. Everything's between like $2 million and $2.5 million. Nothing really exciting to talk about here. The only thing that's notable is that number 19, Dumb Money, the new film about the GameStop scandal, directed by Craig Gillespie, opened in limited release at 8 theaters and brought in a decent number, $217,000. An average of about $27,000 in 8 theaters. It's going to have a platform release. I think it's going to open in more theaters next week, and then back in more and then slowly but surely growing to more theaters on the 29th, and I think it's opening wide October 6th, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see if I can find it here just to double check. Actually, it is opening on wider release on September 29th, which makes sense because of what's opening on the 13th of October, the Taylor Swift movie. But yeah, so it's got a couple of weeks of limited release, and then it'll open wide on the 29th of September, which it'll be interesting to see how that does. It's got some good reviews. It looks like it could be a really good movie, so I'm very curious to see how that one pans out. But like I said, that's the weekend box office overall, so let's get into some story time. So this is a story that actually goes all the way back to last week, literally last Sunday, when it was announced that Drew Barrymore, who has had a couple of pretty successful years hosting a daytime talk show, announced that she is going back to she announced that she was going back to work on the Drew Barrymore show, despite the fact that we're still in a writers and SAG-AFTRA strike, which there's been not a whole lot of promise so far in the last couple of weeks. Up until this week, they said that this week they're going to start doing negotiations with studios again, and one would hope that's going to be the case, but we really don't know for certain, but because this is still going on as we continue forward. But the whole thing started last Sunday when it was announced that Drew Barrymore was saying that she was going to bring her talk show back and continue working on it without the writers involved. And she said on Sunday in a statement that she made a choice to walk away from the MTV Film and Television Awards because she was the host and it had a direct conflict with what the strike was dealing with, which was studios, streamers, film, and television. And it was also the first week of the strike, and so she did that with what she thought was the appropriate thing at the time to stand in solidarity with the writers. And she went on to say that our talk show actually wrapped on April 20th, so we never had to shut down the show. However, I am making the choice to come back for the first time in the strike for our show that has my name on it, but this is bigger than just me. Now, when she said that, right off the bat, she was criticized for it. I mean, she even says in there, she owns the choice. She's in compliance with not discussing or promoting film and television that is struck of any kind. We launched live in a global pandemic. Our show was built for sensitive times and only functioned through what the real world is going through in real time. Yeah, Drew, there's one little thing you forgot to mention there. You launched during a COVID pandemic. You launched at a time when people were still allowed to promote movies and television shows. You're trying to go back on the air, basically saying that you're going to try to continue doing this without talking about movies or television whatsoever, which does not make any sense whatsoever. I mean, like I said, we're currently in the midst of a writer's strike right now and an actor's strike, and there are a lot of movies that are getting pushed back, a lot of TV shows getting pushed back. Nobody can really talk about these things because we're in the middle of a strike between these two things. So, like, when you have these people on there, who are you supposed to have as the guest? Like, really, are you supposed to just have every single musician that's out there come onto the show so you can have somebody to fill the voice since musicians aren't on strike yet, I say, but you never know, we're going to have that happen. But, so right off the bat, this was looking very fishy from the get-go, and then on Monday, that's when the trouble really began to take shape. So, the WGA had already said that they were going to have protests outside of the Drew Barrymore show on Monday morning to discourage the daytime talk show host and her guests crossing the picket line. And unfortunately, it didn't work. And what played out like a cat and mouse between picketers and the show, Barrymore slipped in undetected to tape a pair of episodes with in-studio audiences at 11 and 1 p.m. And there was belief that Oprah Winfrey and Brooke Shields were among the guests for those, but this is coming from Deadline Hollywood. There was a couple of audience members who were at the first taping that were on-air regulars from CBS Mornings, the CBS Morning Show. But then this is where it gets interesting. 2 college students with tickets to the taping never got that far. They told Deadline that they were kicked out when security officers spotted them wearing writer's strike buttons. They even offered to take them off, too. And they basically were evicted from the show. And they were already talked to somebody above us, and they said you're out, and they said that they arrived having no clue that the strike was in progress and that the guild was picketing Barrymore until they saw the marchers and accepted lapel buttons to wear into the taping. So they didn't have the buttons until they went inside of the thing. So they signed filming waivers, they waited to be seated, and then they were verbally assaulted by security officers and actually led out. And sure enough, they eventually joined the picketers outside. And I mean, they went on to say that it was really cute that Drew Barrymore claims that she cares more about her fans and wants her fans to show up for a show, and then they get kicked out for supporting what is right. And they have a good point here. And Drew Barrymore tried to make the argument that she had nothing to do with it, but your name's on the friggin' show. Of course you had something to do with it. And the spokesperson said that it's our policy to welcome everyone to our show tapings, except if you're wearing buttons supporting the thing that we're trying to make you pretend doesn't exist. But due to heightened security concerns today, by the way, this happened on the 22nd anniversary of 9/11, September 11th. So, do what you want about that, but due to heightened security concerns on that day, we regret that 2 audience members were not permitted to attend or were not allowed access, and said that Drew was completely unaware of the incident, which, come on, your name is on the show. Of course you knew exactly what you were doing. Is that you were aware of this. Like, we're in the process of reaching out to the affected audience members to offer them new tickets. And so basically they eventually stood up in front. Like I said, they joined the picketers, and they basically chanted outside the studios, "Hey Drew, we expect better from you." And really, you do kind of expect better from them. But Drew Barrymore was not the only one that eventually got the WGA people involved. There were people marching outside of the View, I think they said, almost since the beginning of the strike in May. And it's basically they're targeting any show that's continuing production during the strike. So just a lot of things going on with that whole thing. And then as the week went on, and you slowly but surely started to realize, oh, by the way, I should mention this. Drew Barrymore's godfather is Steven Spielberg. You know what Steven Spielberg and his wife Kate Capshaw were doing the same day that Drew Barrymore decided to banish people from her show because of supporting the writer's strike? They went ahead and donated $1.5 million in support of the striking writers and actors and others affected by the work stoppages. So that should pretty much tell you everything you need to know about who was in the right and who's in the wrong in this situation. Steven Spielberg and Kate Capshaw obviously were doing something right. Drew Barrymore, not so much. But then that brings us to the rest of the week, because as the week went on, it just got worse and worse and worse for Barrymore. So she put out an apology video. I think this was out on Friday. She sent this out to WGA members regarding her decision to return to her show. Many high-profile actors, writers, and organizations were not happy about this. And actually, Barrymore removed the apology from her Instagram page. And it's just like, you can't help but laugh at this. It's just like, this was such a bad PR move on her part. That's just kind of like it's just hard not to laugh at how badly she handled this. Like it's one of those things like kind of like what we talked about last week with Jimmy Fallon. Like, she apologized and says, "Oh, I'm sorry for all this." No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught doing this. Like, that's all you're really sorry about. Like, you really were planning on going through with this, and like a lot of people came out against her. Alyssa Milano said that she loves her very much. This is not the right move. It impacts the strength of our movement, and she ended up calling it not a great move. Bradley Whitford also had sarcasm, saying that Drew Barrymore would like you to know that undermining union solidarity is the most crucial moment in Hollywood labor history, makes her the victim. And needless to say, she even went on to say it's been a super tough week for her. People like David Krumholtz, Deborah Messing, the WGA also got involved, and basically what happened today was that despite the fact that she put this apology out, she said she was going to continue with the show, it's going to keep moving forward as scheduled, until today, 7 hours ago as of the time I'm recording this, which is probably about 6 o'clock on the East Coast. Drew Barrymore says she's pulling the return of her daytime talk show on hold amid backlash until the strike is over, saying that, "I have listened to everyone. I am making the decision to pause the show's premiere until the strike is over." And once again, she goes on apology, man. "I have no words to express my deepest apologies to anyone I have hurt, and of course to our incredible team who works hard on the show and has made it what it is today. We really tried to find our way forward, and I truly hope for a resolution for the entire industry very soon." completely changing your tone after a week of saying that you're gonna keep doing forward with this. But then when somebody finally calls you out on your BS, this is what you basically do. You basically tell people, I'm finally listening to you. I'm just not gonna go back to work. It's just like it just does not make a whole lot of sense why this was even a good idea to begin with. Like, yes, everybody wants to get back to work. Every writer, every actor, every studio out there wants to get back to work and go back to the way things were, but the writers and actors are legitimately fighting for something important here. They are literally fighting to stop AI from making these people obsolete. They're trying to get more money from streaming deals they should get. Like, there are so many important issues here, and by having this out there, like, by doing this, it really damaged her reputation as a notable actress. I mean, she's a notable celebrity because everyone likes Drew Barrymore. Everyone that is, like, her comeback story after the years that she had after she woke out with E.T., like, it's just like, it really is, it's a great story about somebody who comes back out of this dark place that she was in. And now she has this happen where she's basically just what's the word I want to use here? She's basically trying to make herself the victim for something that she should have thought about beforehand. Like I said before, even if you come back, who are you going to have as guests on here to promote stuff? There's nothing going on right now. Nobody can really promote these movies and TV shows that are coming up because of the strike. And you keep trying to pretend like this is not a big deal when someone finally calls you out on it. It actually is a big deal. And basically, what happened with her basically spread to pretty much every other daytime talk show except for The View, which is still on the air. The Talk was supposed to come back after and paused its season premiere because of the strike backlash. So basically, a lot of people realize that they want to we want to get back to work, but we want to get back to work before we actually have we want to get back to work with a resolution to our problems here. But hey, it's not stopping Bill Maher from coming back to work. So shortly after Drew Barrymore made the announcement that she was coming back, Bill Maher, who hosts HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, announced on Wednesday that he's coming back with new episodes, and he's going to be working without his writers. And Maher's become the first late-night host to return to the air, as Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers, and John Oliver are still not working because of the strike. And the indications are they're not going to be joining anytime soon, which I'll delve into that in just a little bit. It's this controversial decision being made as the show is written by a team of late-night writers who are currently in the 4th month of the strike, and it's just another black eye on Bill Maher's reputation. I mean, Bill Maher already caused controversy in the last week, basically saying his opinions on the strike, calling a lot of the writers' demands kooky, which, like, dude, you're part of this too, you know that, right? Like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, why is he saying, it's like, but like, that's just, but then again, Bill Maher is just, like, Bill Maher is he's such a mixed bag of a person. Like, every time like, sometimes he'll say something funny, but most times you'll be looking at him and just like, what are you even talking about, dude? It's just like, so basically, what's going to happen is that there's no writers on the show. Maher's monologue, the desk piece he does, and the new rule segments are going to be it's basically just going to be the panel discussion with Maher and these different guests. So basically, it's going to be kind of like politically incorrect. The old days of politically incorrect, which would be cool if Bill Maher was the same person that he was 20 years ago, but yeah, not so much. And yeah, a lot of people not really too keen about this happening, but that's just kind of the thing that we're at right now. And going into what I said before about the other late night shows, in particular, like I said, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers, John Oliver, they have no plans on coming back to work anytime soon until the strike is over. The strikes are over, and they're basically still working. They actually teamed up on a podcast together called the Strike Force 5, where they're basically using that to help pay for their staffs during the strike, and they basically have not explicitly talked about returning or not returning to work, but it's clear that they all support the WGA in the fight against the studios. And Myers himself basically said earlier in the summer, as a writer who identifies as a writer, there will be no trying to get around it. I wouldn't be looking for loopholes to figure out how to write the show. And you can really give him a lot of credit for that, because like we saw this week with Drew Barrymore and Bill Maher, like, at some point you have to look at yourself and really go, you gotta start. Maybe I need to stop thinking about myself and think about the people that I work for. And like I think really that honestly we probably will not see these late night hosts coming back until a deal is done. Like, they could theoretically come back, but you basically have a repeat of what happened in 2008. Like, what happened in 2008, if you don't remember, during the 2008 writer's strike, is that, Jimmy Kimmel, Jay Leno, Conan O'Brien, David Letterman, Craig Ferguson, Stephen Colbert, all these guys were working on these late night shows back then, and they were also affected heavily by the writer's strike. But then Jay Leno, David Letterman, Craig Ferguson, Jimmy Kimmel, and Conan O'Brien all came back to work on January 2nd, only 2 months after the strike had started. And then they were followed by Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert a couple of days later. And actually, because of an unusual ownership model, David Letterman's production company, Worldwide Pants, actually was able to strike a side deal with the WGA to go back to work. And basically, when they heard about that on the Strike Force 5 podcast, Jimmy Kimmel basically said that all the other hosts were mad about this. They were able to get back first with their writers as a result of the side deal. And John Oliver basically said, would it be fair to say that in 2008 the hosts didn't get along quite as well as we do? Like, I know it's an incredibly low bar, but that was a sequence of dying marriages that they were engaged in. I mean, some pretty choice words for those guys, and you can definitely sense, if you've watched late night television nowadays, that the late night hosts that they have in prime is all like each other. They all have a sense of working together on various projects, and it's an interesting time period. Like, when David Letterman, Jay Leno, and Craig Ferguson, and Jimmy Kimmel and Conan O'Brien all went back to work, they had to do stuff without their writers. They couldn't do their regular bits. They couldn't do their regular routines because the writers weren't there. So they had to spend almost 2 months coming up with new material and basically trying to fill the time that they had to work with. And we talked about this when the strike actually began, like how Conan O'Brien, Jon Stewart, and Stephen Colbert had a late night war together, and Conan O'Brien would have parts of episodes where he'd spin his wedding ring, and the director of the show would be timing it to see how long it could continue spinning up for a long period of time. And I think the longest was like 47 seconds, if I'm not mistaken. But it's been a while since I've seen those episodes. But yeah, basically what this whole idea is that what I'm trying to basically get off my chest here is that there's a good chance that we will not see these late night hosts until the strike is over, or at least there's a sense that the strike is coming to an end at some point. And it's an interesting situation that we have, because we not only have these guys on strike, but but Comedy Central, they've not had much to do since the Daily Show ended, since the Trevor Noah Daily Show ended, and they've been having these guest hosts coming in. They've been basically figuring out who's going to be the guy to eventually take over for the reins of the Daily Show. And right now, I think the current frontrunner is Hassan Minhaj, who was in the news himself this week, basically coming out and saying that his stories that he told during stand-up routines most of those stories that he tells on there are fabricated. They're not really true. But even after this, at the same time though, like, don't most comedians kind of already do that as it is? Like, it really, like, should this really not be? I don't think that really is that big of a deal. Like, I know that comedians have a lot of stories that are straight from their lives and all that, but should we really be that surprised if there are lies there in terms of their humor? I mean, in terms of the stories that they tell when they're telling these jokes. I mean, it doesn't really surprise me. But despite this, what they claim to be a bombshell story, they still say that Hassan Minhaj is still currently the front runner for the Daily Show job. So whenever they go back to work, he may be the guy that actually ends up getting the job, which I wouldn't mind it so much. I actually do like him a lot. I think he is very funny, and I don't know. I mean, that's something that I think could actually happen once they get back to work. But yeah, that was basically one of the only real major story that broke this week, about how Bill Maher's going back to work, and Drew Barrymore tried to make herself the victim by trying to go back to work, and then they just completely botched that up. So yeah, that's a lot. So yeah, that's basically the big story that came out this week in terms of news, and it was not a busy news week whatsoever. So I was looking online throughout the course of the day, trying to figure out anything interesting that I could probably tell in terms of story. But on Facebook, on my Facebook page, a friend of mine actually posted something on there from Instagram Reels from Attack of the Shaft, and it's a video they put out there called the caption on there is called "The 80s Were Wild." And the video that they show on there is a Band-Aids commercial, Band-Aids Clear Bandages commercial from the 1980s. And so I saw this, and I'm wondering to myself, well, this isn't too bad. Most of the commercial isn't really that bad per se. It's just a very normal commercial for the time period. And it starts off kind of that way. I've actually got it right here. So I'll show you. So I'm going to play the video here. And there's going to be a video on the main channel where I'm going to show the video in that particular video that I'm going to have on there. But so stay tuned for that. But let's talk about what this commercial here. I've actually got it right here. So let's go ahead and play this, and then I'll talk to you about why this is seen as so bizarre. So let's go ahead and play the commercial.
Okay. I love to wear bandages.
Now, at the start of this commercial, I thought the gag was going to be like this guy looks is this guy. There's this woman on here, and it's funny because when they show her in the mirror first, she actually looks like a guy at first, and then she turns her head, and then the rest of her hair comes down, and you realize, oh, it's a woman's. And I thought that was the thing they were talking about, but that's not what it is. Let's continue playing the commercial.
Just to get attention, but now I use Band-Aid brand Clear from Johnson & Johnson. It's the bandage with the see-through strip, so people hardly notice I'm wearing a bandage at all, which is nice. Because now that I'm grown up, I want people to notice me, not my bandage.
Only Johnson & Johnson makes Band-Aid brand Clear. Clearly the best-looking bandage ever.
Okay, so doesn't sound like it's that weird or anything too significant. I think this actress is actually Terry Farrell, who you've seen on Star Trek: The Next Generation. She's also been on Becker. I believe that's her. I could be mistaken on that. So the commercial is almost over, and then they cut to this, and they show a picture of those coupons that you get in the Sunday paper. But I'll just go ahead and play it. I'll just show you what I'm talking about here.
Help us help retarded children. Look for Johnson & Johnson coupons in Sunday's paper.
Yeah, if you didn't hear that, it said help retarded children. Like, it literally says on the coupon paper, help retarded children with Johnson & Johnson. Help us help retarded children by cutting these coupons and using them. Like, look, using the word retarded, I know it's a hotly contested issue nowadays, but apparently back then it was not a big deal to say this, because not only did we have commercials that literally say this, but we also had cartoon shows that said this. Fat Albert did a notable episode where there's this new kid in school, and he's retarded, and the teacher literally tells Fat Albert he's retarded. And he has this look on his face like, what the fuck? It just goes to show you how the 80s and the 70s and 80s were such a different time period, because you could say stuff like this on TV and nobody would bat an eye whatsoever. I mean, we had commercials that talked about, do you douche? There were literally commercials for douches out there, and there was commercials for peanut butter AIDS. Like, a candy company literally was okay with them calling themselves AIDS, like AIDS, especially during the time of the AIDS pandemic too, mind you. I mean, this is. I'm not saying this to be like, oh, this is all wrong at so many levels, but it just goes to show you about, like, how different the time period has changed. Like, nowadays we just say mentally challenged. I mean, that's the term they use when you're talking about, mentally challenged or retarded people. I mean, it's mentally challenged is the way to use the word to use, but I just found that so amusing that this was a commercial that was basically more than okay of saying, help retarded children by redeeming these Johnson & Johnson coupons. And the fact that they say that on the screen, like, I think that makes it all the more hilarious to watch this nowadays, because it's just like you're laughing, but at the same time you're also pulling your neck and doing the Charles Nelson Riley, and here's the funny thing about this whole thing. The reason why I went to Facebook on this is because when you try to find this Band-Aid commercial on YouTube, you can't find this last bit on here. Like, it's just nowhere to be found on there. Like, you have to, whoever had this must have dug deep into, like, an old VHS of classic commercials to find this clip right here, and kudos to them, man, because this is pretty amusing. Like it's surprisingly got more out of me than I could have thought it would have had. But actually, let's go ahead and play it one more time. Why not? I also gotta say, first of all, before we get to that again, I just love how the lady is just like, I wear Band-Aids to get attention. Like, okay, so like these are clear bandages too. So basically, you're trying to promote something that you don't want, is where you're not going to get attention because nobody's going to realize that you're wearing wearing bandages. It's just like the logic in this commercial really does not make a whole lot of sense. But then again, when you watch some of these 80s commercials, some of the logic in here doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. In fact, you know what? Once we get done with this, I want to talk about another commercial that I thought was kind of amusing on here.
Help us help retarded children. Look for Johnson & Johnson coupons in Sunday's paper.
Help us help retarded children by cutting these coupons out of the Sunday paper, because apparently that's going to solve everything, apparently. I mean, that's the logic of these 80s commercials. And like I said before, there was another commercial that I always go back to that just seems like you could only get away with something like this in the 1980s. It's a commercial for Isotoner pantyhose. And some of you might know what this is, and you might be thinking of the Isotoner commercials with Dan Marino. No, I'm not talking about those ones here. I'm talking about the Isotoner commercial where you have this lady who's just walking around town, and it's like she's dancing in the air, literally flashing every single person around her. Like she's jumping on, like these people are jumping on cars. They're lifting their legs up in the air where you can see everything. It's just kind of like, let me play the commercial for you. I got it right here. Yeah, so you got this lady just moving around, just like jumping all around, literally just jumping in the air. She's basically exposing herself to all these people. Like, there's literally a scene where she's literally lifting her legs up in front of a window. It's just kind of like, how can you not laugh at something like this? I mean, it's a really bizarre commercial, but at the same time, I kind of admire it in a way for just how they're just going all in on this. It's just like, these ladies don't give a crap whatsoever about what's happening. But like, the thing literally ends with the lady lifting her leg up in the air in front of a construction site with the construction workers there. It's just like, come on, like, seriously, man. Just like, it's ridiculous, but that's just kind of the fun of these 1980s commercials. You can go back and look at them and realize that, like, this is what the world used to be like back then, and nobody made a big deal about it whatsoever. So, you know what? God bless them for it. I mean, that's nothing that related to anything going on right now. I just thought that was kind of amusing to talk about, much like the next story that we have to talk about. So again, this story really is not anything related to any news going on here, but I thought this was kind of interesting since we're now over 30 years after this story initially broke. But believe it or not, going on a completely different subject from where we ended up last time, but there was a story here about how it's hard to believe, but if you go back before Nickelodeon was in the hands of Viacom and Paramount Pictures, there was a scenario with a Nickelodeon library such as Doug, Rugrats, and Ren and Stimpy, and even shows that followed after that, like SpongeBob, The Angry Beavers, Danny Phantom, Avatar: The Last Airbender, would have been in a place where if plans had gone the way that they would have, they all could have been a part of Disney right now. And yeah, technically Doug is kind of a part of Disney, but not the original run of Doug. But let me explain what happened here. So basically, let's go back to 1993. Bill Clinton's beginning the start of his presidency. Cheers was leaving after 11 years. Seinfeld began its week as the top-rated comedy on television. A young, upstart, unknown Simpsons writer named Conan O'Brien had just landed the difficult task of following David Letterman as he was leaving for CBS. But also at this time, Nickelodeon was not owned by a major studio or corporation. It was owned by the company that owned MTV and VH1, and they were still independently owned at that point. And it wouldn't be until a year later when Paramount and Viacom eventually got their hands on Nickelodeon and made it into what it has become today. But on May 17, 1993, 20th Century Fox bought the motion picture rights to several Nickelodeon shows and actually signed a 2-year deal to develop feature film adaptations of the 3 Nicktoons that they had then, Doug, Rugrats, and Ren and Stimpy, as well as new material. As the story basically said, that 20th Century Fox, in a move underscoring the growing potential of family movies, has signed up Nickelodeon to a 2-year deal for first-look film production deal. The deal marks the first by Nickelodeon, which is a unit of Viacom International Incorporated. I guess I mean, yeah, I guess technically Viacom was still independently owned. It wasn't owned by Paramount at that point, so my mistake on that front. But 20th Century Fox will be responsible for funding the development and production of the motion pictures. The announcement comes less than a week after Fox's rival Warner Brothers said it was starting a family entertainment label for movies and records. Both studios are clearly looking for ways to cut into market dominance. Disney Studios have been establishing for family-oriented films. They talk about Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and how successful they had been. And Nickelodeon, they basically delve into what Nickelodeon was, and the head of 20th Century Fox at the time, Tom Jacobson, said, "The success of the network proves that the creative minds at Nickelodeon have mastered the difficult task of providing entertainment that the whole family can enjoy. We are confident that their unique and original approach to family fare will transfer early to feature film, easily to feature filmmaking." And so yeah, needless to say, that plan did not work out as well as they probably would have. So the decision made at the time was being made because of how Disney was leading in the charge of family entertainment at the time. So Fox needed to get into the game at some point. However, things took a turn when we found out that the forthcoming Viacom purchase basically ended that deal before a film could even get made. In addition to that, there was also the production problems on Ren and Stimpy. Ren and Stimpy creator John Kricfalusi, who had already been dealing with getting episodes out in time on Nickelodeon, he caused creative differences with an inability to market the property into a family-friendly manner instead of a cynical and gross-out humor film. Basically botched that film before it had a chance to really get going, and which in the long term, maybe it was a good decision for Ren and Stimpy that I have a film produced at Fox, because I can only imagine what Fox would have done to butcher that into an animated feature film for kids. I mean, not to say that Ren and Stimpy shouldn't be on a big screen. Hell, I pay good money to see that, but I think if you have to do it, you have to make it a PG-13 or an R-rated film. I mean, just go all out. I mean, do what Sausage Party did, but just don't do what Adult Party cartoon did. I mean, that's a mess on so many levels. But you see kind of what happened. An ambitious idea for the time, but it never really came to fruition. Although both Doug and Rugrats eventually did get theatrical releases later on in the decade. The Rugrats movie came out in '98, and Doug came out in 1999. It's definitely a case of what if, What if Fox had produced some of these movies before Paramount did? Like, we'd be looking at a much different situation nowadays. And now, with all that said, you can kind of see where the title of this post comes back into play. Because let's just say that Fox did go ahead and make these movies. Fox made a movie about Doug. Fox made a movie about the Rugrats. Fox made a movie about Ren and Stimpy. Had they done so eventually down the line, they would have been a part of the Disney library, because now Fox owns everything from Fox. Fox owns everything. Disney owns everything now by Fox. And yeah, Nickelodeon's libraries of movies could have been under the Disney brand by now. We could have these movies on Disney Plus right now. Hell, we could have had TV shows on Disney Plus. Like, maybe even the rest of the Nickelodeon library would be there at this point. All of them could have eventually made it over to Disney had the Fox deal gone through with Nickelodeon, but it was never meant to be. And again, all we can ask ourselves on this front is basically, what if? Like, what if this had actually happened? But with that said, you can see Ren and Stimpy on Disney Plus if you've seen the Brother from the Same Planet episode of The Simpsons, where the Ren and Stimpy animators actually animated a sequence in there, not with John Kricfalusi or Billy West involved, but it's Dan Castellaneta doing the voices for both Ren and Stimpy. So if you want to go check that out, go on to Disney Plus, look for the Brother from the Same Planet episode, and you can just find it right there. That's the only way you're going to see Ren and Stimpy on Disney Plus, or pretty much any Nickelodeon show on there. I don't even think Doug is on there. I think Doug's first movie's on Disney Plus, but not the Doug Disney show. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting to delve into here. Something that almost happened that really would have changed the whole spectrum of how how Nickelodeon would be right now if it was under the Disney label. But just a real what if situation there. So that's pretty much going to do it for the stories. Let's get to some recommendations for the week. And my recommendations this week, I finally got the chance to see Adventure Time, Fiona and Cake, which is basically a continuation of the original Adventure Time series with Finn and Jake. That show, the original Adventure Time, was more made for a young adult audience, while this show is more made for a more adult audience, and not an adult audience similar to something like, Velma or Harley Quinn, like those shows that are on HBO Max, but this is a show that's focusing on the two main characters that were in several episodes of Adventure Time, the original series, Fiona the Human and Cake the Cat. And basically, the show follows them as much older as much older. Fiona lives with her cat Cake in an alternate reality without music, spending her days cycling through dead-end jobs at night. She dreams of a magical world that appears to be forever unreachable. And Simon, in the land of Uru, works from home, who used to be the Ice King, of course, once again played by Tom Kenny. He's made it into a living exhibit of a bygone era, and later the trio travel throughout the multiverse and are also being chased down by a powerful new antagonist who is determined to track them down and erase them from existence. And the great thing about this is that not only is this a more adult show than the original Adventure Time, it's still pretty funny. Like, it's still a well-made show. They brought back Madeline Martin as well as Roz Ryan, who were in the original, who were in those episodes as Fiona and Cake. And the show is still really, really funny. This is a show that has still held up very well over time. This is a show that Adventure Time still holds up very well over all these years. And this show just gets better and better. Like, they find a great way to handle the humor in this and handle the more adult humor in here. But it's like the show has grown up with its audience. Basically, it's like the equivalent of It's kind of like it kind of reminds me of Steven Universe Future, the last season of Steven Universe, which a lot of people were not the biggest fans of, but I like that show a lot. I'm a big Steven Universe fan. So, but I definitely got a vibe of Steven Universe Future, except done better here. I think they do this in a much better way. It's done by the same people who worked on Adventure Time too, so they know exactly what to do to make a quality show out of this, and they do a pretty good job with it. I think it's a very good show. It's been on the air now for a couple of weeks now. They've just aired the 6th episode this past week, and there's still 4 more episodes left in 2 more weeks, so I'm really excited to see where they go from there. So that's my streaming recommendation for Adventure Time with Fiona and Cake. In terms of the newer releases coming out on home media this week, not a whole lot. The big new release, the one I'd probably recommend, is The Little Mermaid, the new Little Mermaid movie, which I actually thought was much more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be, and it mostly works because of both Halle Bailey as Ariel, who I think is just pitch perfect in that role. She's the one that elevates the film to another level. Some of the changes, I like what they did, but at the same time, there are definitely changes that do not work as well as they thought they probably did. Melissa McCarthy, I thought, was pretty good as Ursula as well, and I think they did a pretty good job of adapting the story to a live action format. It's always gonna pale in comparison to the original Little Mermaid. The original Little Mermaid is a classic film, but if you go into this with the right mindset and actually go into this giving the movie a chance and really just focusing on the performance by Halle Bailey, I think you definitely get much more than you're expecting from this film. I mean, it's definitely worth a watch. If you don't want to watch it on physical media, you can watch it right now on Disney+. It's definitely go into it with the right mindset, and I think you can definitely find a lot to really admire about this film. Some other recommendations I can make. The Exorcist is coming on 4K this week, so with the new movie coming out in a couple weeks, it might be time to check that one out again. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen the original Exorcist, so I'd be very curious to see how that looks in 4K. We also have The Last Dragon coming on 4K this week, a fun 80s cheesy over-the-top movie is a classic on so many levels. I mean, classic film all around. Like, I actually might get a physical copy of this if I can find a way to get one, but just a fun movie, and I really, really like the steelbook that they have for this, which is using the poster art here. So I think I am going to try to get a copy of this. But so yeah, Adventure Time with Fiona and Cake, The Little Mermaid, and The Last Dragon. Those are my recommendations for the week. So other than that, though, that's about it. This might actually be one of the shortest episodes we've done at this point. I mean, I always say that we're going to have more than an hour's worth of material with this, and we've been pretty consistent on that, at least an hour's worth. This is going to be the lowest, the shortest episode of the ones that we've done so far. And like I said, it's just been a kind of a slow week in terms of news. I had actually struggled to actually find some stuff to talk about, but hopefully we'll get some more interesting news stories coming out over the next couple of days and weeks, and hopefully you guys will be enjoying this. I'm actually having a good time making these videos, and I'm hoping that you're enjoying these as well. So with that said, thank you guys for watching, and if you want to see any of the other episodes we've done, check out the playlist, hit the subscribe button and the like button if you like this, and I'll see you guys next time. So until the next time I see you, we are out.